Hola, bon dia a tothom. Buenos días.
Hello, good morning.
Saludos desde el Hospital
Greetings
de
from Sant Pau Hospital in
a todas las
Barcelona.
personas que estáis ya
To
conectadas vía
all
Zoom.
those of you who are connected via Zoom,
la oportunitat avui
we have the opportunity today to
una àgora mixta
experience a mixed agora thanks to technology, making use of this wonderful venue, culturally wonderful venue at the Sant Pau Hospital in Barcelona, Modernista Hospital with the presence, an Art Nouveau Hospital with the presence of very valuable speakers here on site, but also online, more than 130 people connected all over Spain and also in other places in Europe and the US. Before in the introduction, the institutional introduction, I would like to remind you that you have 3 options for simultaneous interpretation at the bottom of your screen. And please switch off your microphones on Zoom. And if you have any technical problems or if you have any questions, you can do so via the chat. You can enter your question that will be posed to the different speakers after their presentations. I would like to thank the team of the Transparency Agency for their effort in organizing this event. And I would also like to thank all of the services of the Metropolitan area, protocol, communication, management office, who have given us the support to be able to organize this hybrid system, which is not as easy as it may seem. We hope it will work out. And if there's something that doesn't work out, technically speaking, or on the human side of things, we apologize in advance. On the other hand, I would like to also thank the members of the Metropolitan Council who are here today with us in this institutional opening. It is an honor for us to have the Vice Chair, Ernest Maragall, of the International Cooperation Area of AMB here with us, with Pilar Díaz Romero, Mayor of Esplugues de Llobregat, and also Councilwoman and the Mayor of Sant Feliu de Llobregat, and Mr. Isidre Sierra Fusté, Mayor of Sant Climent and councillor in the Metropolitan area. So I will pass the floor over to the Vice President, Vice Chair, Ernest, Maragall y Mira. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this wonderful venue, which is the heritage of the city, Hospital de Sant Pau. Congratulations to the Transparency Agency for having invited us here today, and even more so for having done so with very good reason. Not only in order to be here together to have a debate together, but also to focus on an aspect which is key and which is becoming central in a very clear manner. The good use of technology, good governance. The title is provoking in and of itself, Utopia, Dystopia. And you are the ones who should prove here today that it's neither one nor the other. The idea is to build a democratic reality, an institutional reality of a relationship between citizens and the administration. Of course, demanding transparency, clarity, traceability, verification, efficiency, all of the elements that you know so very well. The Transparency Agency has every right to call you all here today, and in order to also have such a relevant audience, both local and international. And I think this is the 6th session of this subject matter, so there is consistency here. There's undebatable quality, but there's also ambition to go beyond, to not always stay in one capacity, but Gemma is always thinking about what's next. What should we do differently? What should we change? She's always changing something, or at least trying to. And aside from that, our presence here today, the presence of the 4 members of the institutional representation who are here today, has a meaning in and of itself. Not in order to contribute the real content of the session, which will start in the next panel, and in the talks, which are all extraordinarily interesting. And I think they will be so very interesting to all of you, but also to show that there is involvement and commitment of the institutions. The agency is not alone, and the Metropolitan Council understands it, encourages it to move forward. And I think, well, she thanks us for being here together with them. And as I'm saying, we are here together. We're not protagonists. We're not leading. We're here to show the institutional commitment, but we're also here to learn, which I think is the best thing we can do today. And this session makes me think of a recent publication, the annual publication of CIDOP, which includes a publication about the status of the world and a very interesting reflection about technology, post-pandemic technology, and the concept of data exploitation and who, how, when, why, under which conditions, etc. And there they talk about concentration of power, the role of large corporations, administrations, public administrations, and these concepts of hard power behind the use of these data, or one of the potential uses, not always legitimate uses of these data. And they talk about, in this article, about who is the subject and who is the object around the use of technology. Who calls the shots and who... And there's something that's very interesting, which is behind everything that I've seen in the program, which is who or what is the new landscape of rights that we are willing to debate, set, protect. They talk about neuro rights in this piece. So how do we do it? How do we protect our brains, so to speak, from what's coming, from what they're sending us, from what occupies our time? And just to finish, I would like to speak of something that's in my best interest, actually. We are here as a representation of the administration. We're here to listen to our colleagues, and I think that the fact that all 4 town councils are here today is valuable. Barcelona, Esplugues, Sant Feliu and Sant Climent town councils. I think this is a very good snapshot of the metropolitan area and this urban reality that we represent today. And I believe that we can now acknowledge the power of this room, this event, and also the power thanks to the use of technology, power and solvency. And today, you will be reflecting, you will be thinking, you will contribute to our thinking with your non-artificial intelligence. It's real intelligence. You will contribute that to the table. And I think that by doing that, in a way, if you allow me, you're also taking on a collective responsibility as collective, as professionals, as experts. And this is the responsibility to take these thoughts into and translate them into proposals and then into evidence, because institutions and so that institutions and democratic representatives can make decisions, they can risk to make decisions and take the necessary paths. And here we are more than ever with our ears perked up to pay attention and draw the right conclusions from your words. Thank you very much, and congratulations to the agency.
En segon lloc, en segon lloc, li donarem la paraula a la senyora Pilar Díaz.
Secondly, Pilar Díaz Romero has the floor, Mayor of Esplugues de Llobregat, councillor of the Metropolitan area, and representing a town council that does a very good job. Thank you very much. If you'll allow me, I will take off my face mask so that I can talk. I don't have a very loud voice, and I think you wouldn't be able to hear me well. I'm delighted to be here. It is an honor, and I would like to congratulate the Transparency Agency and their director for the initiative of having organized these sessions with a very suggestive topic, technology and good governance. We love good governance, and I will tell you why in a minute. And technology as well. We have many goals, and in this pandemic, we have different missions to accomplish, but we have two very clear ones. One is the green transition, and the other one is digital transformation. This digital transformation, which, well, in a way had already started. The digital revolution was already ongoing before the pandemic. It's not something that just got here, but it is also true that recent events have accelerated it in a way we did not envision, and this is very good news. And in this regard, I also wanted to start with a sentence that Ernest already said: technology, good governance, utopia, dystopia. So for us, it's neither one nor the other necessarily. Technology and good governance should go hand in hand, and this is a very real relationship. Just as in a couple, that you need to take care of a relationship on a daily basis, with technology, it's the same thing. And technology can help us become the public administrations that we want to be, devoted to good governance, and especially this transparency that is essential if we want shared governance and the participation of citizens in public affairs. And the question, which is the million-dollar question, is what is this snapshot of this good governance that goes for innovation and a good use of technology that we have? And so if we want for this to go hand in hand and for it not to be either utopia or dystopia, we need an innovative government, because it needs to benefit from the technology that we have in the development of processes and services, and also because it explores new pathways to take on the tasks that we have. We like innovating, but some of the tasks are very clear. The law sets our competencies, the competencies of government, and what we need to do exactly. And this use of technologies allows us to do so in a much more efficient manner. So a town council or an administration, to use a general term, I don't want to exclude other local administrations, it should be innovative and transparent. We cannot conceive democracy any other way at the moment. And we shouldn't only take care of our duties, our specific duties, well, and something else that has a very significant weight in our budgets, but it is also key to do so giving timely explanations, because we are administering money that's not ours. This is public money, so when we do that, we also need to explain what we're doing. Not only in a way that is obscure and not understandable, we need to make a huge effort so that the people, those who do not follow up our comings and goings on a daily basis, so that they can understand perfectly well, when we approve a budget, what do we devote every cent to in that budget, without names of items that are absolutely obscure for citizens as a whole. So this transparency, this need for accountability and this need to explain everything in a way that is easy to understand. Actually, in our case, we normally use 3 indicators that can inspire us in this exercise of transparency. On the one hand, the Transparency Index of Town Councils. You know perfectly well this is the one created by the NGO Transparency International here in Spain, devoted to fighting corruption, and it groups together civil society and different stakeholders and governments in a global coalition, also the Laboratory of Journalism and Collaboration for a Plural Society of the UAB, and their Transparency Certification Info Participa, which is based on the map of good public communication practices in Catalonia. We're proud to be the only town council that has met 100% of the indicators, but I don't want to shout it out for everyone to see. This is just one more effort, but honestly, we don't believe it, because when you see on a daily basis how we conduct our activities and we fulfill our duties, I think there's still a long way to go. We have not reached the summit. It is a stimulus, it is a motivation, but we need to make it further. And we also need to be a local administration which is close to the citizens, and this we can do via transparency. If you are transparent, citizens can have the information in a very clear and understandable manner. And all of this encourages citizens to participate in decision-making, joint decision-making, because we do not aspire to having citizens who only vote once every 4 years and that's it. We want to have citizens who are part of the decision-making process, and we do not want to lose the great talent that we have in our city. We have talent as in all municipalities, and it's important that this talent can be added to the modest talent that we have in the town council. Of course, participative and collaborative, I don't need to explain it because I think one goes with the other. Efficient, we are capable of using the tools that we have with this technology in the best way possible, and optimize, because we want to spend the least amount of money to do the same thing. And without further ado, I will stop now to talk about efficiency and the use of technology, in this case applied to transparency, but I will give you a brief example. What we would like to do now is what many sectors of the productive economy do, big technological. I didn't want to say it, but I will say it. Amazon, does it. We have data, we have a lot of data. So why can we not exercise our competencies and our tasks by using this data always in the adequate manner and with the permission of citizens? Why should we bother citizens every year asking them for something that is repetitive? And, for example, a grant for school lunches, which is something that you request every year. And this is what happens as in Esplugues. We ask for the same things over and over again. We are reactive, and we ask for them to request the grant when we can foresee what family will request it.
So this is the same that I'm telling you. So we want to be a much more efficient administration to better accept transparency. To me, this is a very important topic. So we can foresee many things. We can also understand. We can also embrace what the citizens want from administration. We try not to bother citizens. We'll try that citizenship experience, when in relationship with the city councils and the public administration, should be as agreeable as possible. And I dare to say that it should be a fantastic experience. So all these informations and all the data, when they are well structured, and if we have a good use of data, we will have a much more friendly relationship with the citizens for them to take better decisions. Well, I think that these are the 3 pillars of good governance I don't want to say other things because we have a very long seminar today and other speakers in the panel. So these are the three main pillars. Transparency, participation, to us it's a capital for better decision-taking and collaboration with the citizenship, the corporations, companies, and all the activity that happens in our city. Once again, congratulations, and I wish you a very good job because we have a lot to do when dealing with transparency and digital transformation.
Moltíssimes gràcies.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Lídia Muñoz Cáceres, Mayor of Sant Feliu de Llobregat and Councillor of the Metropolitan area of Barcelona. Thank you so much to all my colleagues. Thank you very much to all the members of the panel and to all of you on the other side of your screens that are virtually listening to our words. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your kind invitation and to count on our personal experiences. We represent here the institutions of the metropolitan area. However, we do also represent citizenship. We should always bear in mind this concept. We are always representing citizenship. We will never replace citizens. So this utopia or dystopia should be a reality in front of us, and also to reach higher horizons on a daily basis for us to be thrilled and to make these concepts to be real and to face different concepts as many other issues. So the idea it is to make these ideas land in quite a complicated and complex situation, a context that needs to face several challenges. The pandemic has boosted other processes and also had speed up many procedures. And we, as representatives, we must implement the good instruments for a good governance and to get closer and to face such a difficult context, this lack of trust, this disaffection of citizens towards the administration. So we need to get closer when we take decisions together with the citizens that we all represent. And thank you so much for allowing us to make this kind of exercise. We as mayors, as we are not in our office today, we are not today in our city, it's always a beautiful thing to share what we do. What's our purpose? What's the time that we have, and what do we do when we work, when we are outside of this comfort zone? So it's always great to set the connections and being interconnected with you. We love from Sant Feliu to tell the citizens what are the tools to improve good governance, what are the daily examples, and how everything that has to do with open governance and technology at the service of people. So to us, it's a long-haul flight. It's not a one-stop methodology. We need to improve the approximation of the administration towards the citizens. We need to get closer. We do have several projects that make us to feel very thrilled and encouraged. When we talk about digital administration, we, as Pilar said, this digital administration is at the end of the day suffering a transformation. It is a challenge when we are reconstructing social issues and economical issues in Europe. We cannot do from one day to the other, so we need to do it slowly, taking into account all the perspectives, and from our city we are doing it so for many years. It's not a burst, it's not an explosion, it has to be something that we will design. It should be a strategy, and it is something that we are doing in Sant Feliu for many years. We do have a specific strategy for this open government strategy, and always under the umbrella of some values that should help our administration to be smart enough to be clear enough, to make our projects known by the people, and we want to make everybody to have access to those. And also, what about the digital gap? How did we help citizens? We are implementing an e-administration that sometimes it's difficult to take it for granted, because the citizens, they need to have an acquaintance with the administration in a telematic manner, and we were able to overcome the obstacles that entail this new strategy. So we cannot replace the service that we can offer personally, but we also need to be aware that there are some changes of attitude and behaviors in our society. Let me offer you an example. As Pilar mentioned, how are we asking citizens to get in touch with the administration? Well, during the pandemic, everything that had to do with requirements and petitions, demands towards the administration, we had around 70% on presence and 30% virtually. Last year, 2020, we had more or less the same percentage, and in 2021, 70% of the procedures are made online and 30% physically. So the pandemic has had an impact, but also the administration has played a very important role. We've been very careful when being together with people. We accompany them all along the processes. I think that this is very important, and we should work it in a holistic manner. Beyond digitalization, this was something that my colleagues mentioned before. When we talk about technology and due diligence, this is an added value to us. We, in Sant Feliu, we follow all the directions, the mandate, the agreement of cities. We do have a charter of cities involving the social and economic fabric of the cities and municipalities. When we take decisions and the follow-up of the decisions that we're taking, when we have a process of due diligence, we should respect it as much as possible. But let me tell you something. This relationship with these due diligence processes cannot only be virtual. We need to be also present. We must be there. And this is something that cannot be replaced. So we are totally open when we offer data. We do have this due diligence updated every minute in our website. There are no filters at all. So this is very important when we bear in mind our mandate, but it has to be always together with being present, and that is something that cannot be replaced. We could talk about many other things, right? And it has been mentioned before. All the changes that the technology produced has to be always in line with the people. Well, finally, in Sant Feliu, we were able to hide and to cover the tracks of the train. We are very proud of that. We began the works for that. And you could tell me, what's the relationship with these works and technology? Well, we have a public consultation together with the citizens, and through e-votations, we could make possible, and we are making possible that people from their rooms at home, they could talk about the city transformation. And so this consultation and referendum will let us know what will be the final result of this work. So how to put democracy at home? How to bring this democracy at home? Technology at the service of people, as I said before. And we'll have to use all the tools that are available, always aiming towards the future, and also to make people to feel that they belong to our city. I can see Gemma that is telling me to stop. Thank you very much, Gemma, for inviting us once again. We wish you a very fruitful seminar. Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you very much, dear Mayor. Lídia Muñoz, we are here at the service of citizens. This is the common denominator of our role. When we talk about good governance, this is exclusively our work and the purpose and the reason for being. Well, I'd like to thank you once again, Isidre Sierra Fusté. He's the mayor of a very small village or city in this metropolitan region of Barcelona, with a very rich landscape, very diverse, very different from Barcelona or Sant Feliu de Llobregat. He is a gentleman, always with a very good will, good intentions. Sometimes resources are lacking, and he had to make a lot of things for transparency and good governance. Well, I'm the last one. So you talked about many things here. I'd like to thank the organization. My municipality, 4,100 inhabitants. We have 970 municipalities in Catalonia, and I rather say that 900 municipalities are not cities. But I'm a city inside the metropolitan area. When we think about, we are a city despite being so small. So let's think about these very small municipalities. For sure, we are lacking loads of funds and resources. But I'm talking about the specific case of Sant Climent de Llobregat. Sant Climent de Llobregat has hired half-day an engineer, half-day secretary. So when we talk about technology, the same efforts that should be made by the big administration should be made also by small municipalities. But everything is possible. Citizens, well, they can say that we don't have to maintain loads of roads in our village, but yes, we need to modify and to update our website for everybody to have access to data and not to look for maintenance of public works and for not to talk about the contingency funds, right? So when we think about an app such as the one Sergi mentioned before, there are some municipalities where we don't have fiber, we don't have good connections. So those neighbors in Bellver de la Cerdanya or the neighbor living in a neighborhood of Barcelona city, they should have the same rights and the same right to access to these connections. So for you to change the website, you offer as an example some municipalities and local administrations that should be made by the mayor. And this is not good, but this is what we are doing. So everything that we make possible from our side, it will be a great contribution to open the doors to our citizens, for them to have access to the administration. But there are loads of demands from our side. Good governance, transparency must be a reality, and this is what we are doing. This is quite tough. This is what we try to do. We try to reach at a minimal level of accessibility and open government, not just a snapshot. It should be like a movie, a long-term work. In Sant Climent, we understood that this is a need that we could not postpone. We couldn't procrastinate anymore these problems. Therefore, we are available. We have different participatory processes that will offer some equality levels to citizens. Examples such as funds offered by the Metropolitan area should be allocated for those people that didn't know how to use an app, that they do not know how to use a cell phone. Therefore, we were able to have some training sessions to bridge the gap, digital gap. And from the office of the City Council, we do have a place for open governance and transparency to help citizens if they want to claim something, if they want to ask for something, if they have questions or doubts. Well, the metropolitan area of Barcelona offered the support that was needed. And I do understand that the supramunicipal organizations, they have this role to play. We have 900 municipalities in Catalonia with less than 20,000 inhabitants, and this supramunicipal institution will help us. We do have many other institutions such as Diputació, different county councils that will help us. So, in conclusion, let's think that all the discussion that will be held today and the opportunity to share the experiences, let's think about examples such as Barcelona, Sant Feliu, Esplugues, that they have many things to do, and the big numbers of inhabitants will offer some support, and but sometimes you have these processes when we involve citizens, it's going to be difficult for small municipalities. But this is the first step to reach this right equality. So, congratulations for the seminar, and to all of you in the room, this is a kind of a very interesting opportunity. There are speakers with great knowledge, with loads of expertise and know-how in the program today. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. So, we close the institutional opening of the representatives. I'd like to excuse the president of the Metropolitan area, the Mayor Ada Colau. She had a previous commitment, but she was in the previous meeting. So, thank you so much, and we are deeply sorry for the delay. Well, now I'd like to call the next panelist and speakers, as well as the moderator.
El podeu posar en pantalla? Com s'apaga? Perdó. Ok. Sí. No, apaga-m'ho, apaga-m'ho.
Sí. Molt bé. Comencem ara.
All right. Now we are going to start this next panel, Digital Revolution, Context and Ethical Challenges. Well, we are dealing with a digital transformation context. We're talking about the 4.0 industry, which is the industry digital transformation. And the main purpose of the panel, it is to talk about different perspectives, such as AI, as well as open data, open government, as well as the freedom to create the things. And when we talk about creating things, we talk about material and non-material things. And when we talk about material things, we talk about real devices, software, electronics, hardware, and many other things. And finally, we talk about quite an interesting phenomena, that it's the so-called surveillance capitalism, that has a very important impact when facing some specific principles such as human rights. The three main domains and subjects are quite recent. Right now, we can see just the beginning and the first principles, and we have the pleasure and the privilege to count with some speakers that work for building these principles. They are the first range. When we deal with AI, we count on with support of and the presence of Karina Gibert. I'll introduce them in depth. She's going to talk about open data, and we have for the open data and open governance, we have Mercè Crosas. When we talk about the freedom of creation and creativity, we count with David Cuartillas. Hello, how are you, David? And finally, when we deal with the surveillance capitalisms, we count with Wouter Tebbens. He's going to talk about this issue. And finally, the idea, it is to think and to reflect on the next question. When we build these principles, are we building good principles? Are they mature enough? Are they accepted enough from a social perspective? Are they correct? Are they inclusive? And will be all society will be able to respect them? So this is kind of an open question that will offer an opportunity to see the real application of these perspectives in society. So I'll give the floor to the first speaker, Karina Gibert. I want to read you a little bit about her CV. Chair, professor at the UPC, PhD in IT, co-founder of the IDEAI, which is a Center for Data and AI, Vice Dean at the Informatics School of Catalonia, and founder of CoreInf, School of Women. She's been involved for strategic projects in the Catalan government for developing AI, and she's also a councillor for the European Commission when dealing with AI issues. Karina, you've got the floor. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. What a pleasure to be amongst you today. Thank you very much to all the organizers. Thank you for inviting me. I do believe that seminars such as today's seminar are very important when facing the problems that we are facing today. I was asked to talk about the context and how the ethics has to play a role inside the AI structures. I will skip some cases. I'm going to offer you a broad image about the AI. I always try to offer an open perspective because I don't know what's the knowledge of the audience. And finally, I'll offer you some practical cases, and I'll talk about everything that we are doing at the European level when dealing with ethics. Well, AI appears in 1956 thanks to John MacArthur's work. He organized a summer school in Dartmouth, and well, he is together with 10 savvy people to rethink transparency. Can we be specific when we think about the actions of humans and to be as precise as a machine? Well, that's when the AI appears. We try to find formal languages that describe intelligence, human intelligence, and we can see that they suffered loads of development and progresses. And suddenly, we realize that the AI appears in a manner that wants to program machines and devices that will be able to reason as humans and how to put together some ideas to reach some conclusions. This has to go through to hibernation. There were some technical issues, mainly when dealing with computing and different combinations. So we suffered two big hibernations of AI. And finally, in the 80s, we got out from this hibernation. And the expert systems always clash with that wall because never the expert is able to convey the problems, and they are not able to transfer the information to the machine because the experts, they know in a non-aware manner what happens. So it's like asking to a doctor, hey, offer us some patients and the machine will offer you an answer. What has to happen for someone to suffer and to get COVID or not? So that's how machine learning appears. This automatic learning system put at the center the learning procedures, and suddenly it triggered all the processes for AI to be useful, to get data from all over the place and to learn about the world and the planet and to take decisions from the data.
And at the same time, the Internet of Things developed, the Internet, networks or social media communications, the web, Wi-Fi. And we don't only have technology now that learns some data, we can collect data from anywhere. Actually, people now wear these things on their wrists that tell us about everything that we do, whether we're agitated or not, whether we're running a fever or not, everything that we do. So these two technologies have combined, so to speak. And this has led us to realize that if we exploit data, we can know a lot about what will happen. So all of these decision-making processes have, the technology has a strong impact on them, and this has made the productive sector boom, this boom that we had not experienced until today. This is not devoid of risks. We will talk about this in a minute. And Catalonia is very well placed. We have an international community at the moment which started around the 80s, one of the oldest in Europe. It's very well structured. And in this regard, we work quite intensely in this area. Where do we have AIs? We have AIs everywhere. Alexa, Siris are all around us. The other day, a colleague asked, well, every 10 minutes we were having a conversation, he had questions, and he was asking all the time, Siri, when was the person born? We were in the middle of the Pyrenees, and he had that machine that was telling us the answers. And the GPS is a part of all of our lives, the Roombas. People are very happy for these machines not to get tangled in the rugs and fall down the stairs. And this is a water treatment plant with a remote. It has a smart supervisor that helps supervise the process of these waters. We have video games, self-driven cars. And this has been working for many years. There are AIs in the industrial design, in the management of emergencies and faults and breakdowns at the Hong Kong Metro. Hong Kong sends 10,000 engineers every night to repair the metro lines, and an AI sends them. And medical diagnosis is something that is more implemented than we know. We know that doctors don't let the AI decide, but there are AIs that determine where the tumors are and mark them, and this has been happening for a while. In terms of smart cities, connectivity in cities, for example, in Barcelona now we have these warnings on bus stops that will tell us how long it will take for the bus to reach us, which was unthinkable in the past. Industrial design 4.0, industry, as Tobias said, are areas in which AIs are coming in strong. And then we have the nasty side of things, advertising, and these recommenders that are transparent and are present in all search engines. And all of these, and we know this, we have pervasive AI everywhere. And it is imperceptible because the AI doesn't tell us, oh, I'm here, I'm helping you know these or that. These are transparent algorithms that are intertwined everywhere and make you see certain ads, certain recommendations. Earlier today, one of the mayors said, do we need to ask for the information every year? No, if there's an AI, no, we don't need that. The same technology that will recommend you to request the grant is the same technology that helps us select a movie on Netflix. And we need two important things, clearly. One is, how do we envelop this with an ethical framework that will protect the user from this very powerful technology? And when this technology makes recommendations, how do we get it to explain them in a way that is understandable enough so that users can know why the decision was made and how? I will be very quick here. I will go through some cases very quickly. One is a case of smart cities. This is one of our projects, a very old one, but it was already about using the wireless network so that we could have a follow-up of elderly people who are at home and who need care. So how to integrate all of the healthcare services and social services which belong to different administrations, and how to book the medication tests, x-rays, how to make all of those arrangements and appointments. And this is part of reality nowadays, and it uses personal data. It has to. Here we have another case, a case of strategy. This was the WHO, when they decided they needed to deploy mental health services in developing countries, and they did not know exactly how to start. And in order to know the situation of the countries, we used AI, using the previous knowledge of territorial delegates to define the typology and the data of the countries, to define the typology of countries. And this is one of the tools for explainability that we use. And here, I cannot point here, can I? Yes. So here we can see, for example, that there is a group of countries. These are capacity resources variables. Here there was Tanzania and these other countries. These others have more resources, but they have a problem with the arrangements of the service. They were still using a lot of electroshocks, etc. And when you manage and you need to develop intervention policies in these countries with a tool such as this one, you need to start from scratch, but not here. Here you need transformation, change of culture programs. So these tools are good for helping in policy design in different areas. This is the ontology that came out of that. This is the project that we're conducting at the moment, Gavius, together with the Gabon Metropolitan Councils, and it is precisely about the digital transformation of social services, attempting to have proactive services that can guide these people with more of a digital divide in terms of how to make the necessary arrangements. And here we're facing awful challenges because users oftentimes don't even have a digital entity. So here we have an access problem that is being resolved within the project, and another one, which is this idea of whether the user allows the town council to study them, tell them what is good for them, and whether they grant permission to access their data. You cannot understand these proactive processes and make recommendations without the data of the citizens. But if the citizens do not allow you to use their data for you to learn, then you cannot learn. And this is the dilemma that we need to bear in mind. This is something that is linked to other ideas that were debated, the INSES COVID project, which was precisely used to define an infrastructure where citizens, or the basic areas of social services of Catalonia, contacted citizens with specific profiles that we wanted to know how COVID had impacted them. And these data were treated with AI techniques. This was a questionnaire answered via mobile phones, very quick and easy. And if some citizens did not have a mobile phone, then social services lent them one. And we had, in a very short time, we had a lot of answers, around 1,000 citizens that covered the entire territory. And we did this automatic exploitation of data and directly. And we did not use only classical AI that organizes data, but also an AI that created a document. So data exploitation generates a report where you make a couple of comments and then you go to an executive management meeting where you can make any necessary decisions. In 20 minutes you can have this document available with any questionnaires. More smart cities aspects. Here we work with Twitter to understand and automatically interpret what happens to the city. Precisely one of the things that we detected was the V of 11 September of the Catalan National Day. We were running the pilot and we started seeing a lot of warnings, and it was because the system was detecting a demonstration in Barcelona that we had not input in the system. So you can have information about what is happening in the city, where there is a problem, where there is traffic, an unexpected demonstration, people drinking on the streets, an excess of people at the beach. And this was done by Twitter, but many people do not have Twitter, and these are specific segments of the population. Circular economy. Here we have a smart recommender of how to recycle, so how to manage waste so they are recycled. This is very much related to circular economy and sustainability, and I'll stop shortly. Here, with COVID, one thing that was done in analyzing waste was seeing whether there was COVID or not in wastewater. These analyses that seem not to impact the rights of people can tell you exactly what the people in a neighborhood are eating or doing. So here it is not clear. The fact that making certain data transparent will maintain protection of citizens. So with COVID, the idea that the decisions that we make have an impact on what the AI can do and cannot do, and this will have an impact on what we decide and what we do not decide and how we decide. Well, this is a very graphic example that is related to a healthcare decision that probably from the healthcare point of view was very well made at the beginning of the pandemic, which was to ask the people who were infected to shelter in place. We asked them to shelter in place without a PCR. And so during the first few months, all of the prediction models of the pandemic did not work well. So then we said we will find data in the funeral services. That didn't work out very well either. And now we have another problem. They are being given 2 different courses of the vaccine, they're being given 2 shots of the vaccine because it's not well recorded that they actually had the condition. So if we do not get the data, the decisions that we make that are well made, I'm not debating the decision in and of itself. It's probably a well-made decision, but this always has an impact on data, and this has consequences. So I always say that there should be data experts helping the people who make these decisions, at least to put things on the table, to say, okay, if you do this, or for example, if making them understand that certain people are not in the models, well, we need to understand this. And this is a case, a recent case. What would happen if we were to publish water consumption curves of the different districts? I'm not talking about personal data, I'm talking about publishing data from Las Corts neighborhood or data based on the postcode. Since we know that when there are ads on TV, people go to the loo and then there's more water consumption, we may even get to know what TV is watched in each neighborhood, and we know when to place an ad. So anonymizing data is not always perfectly safe. So, well, I just wanted to think about the idea that having data and publishing them is not always perfectly safe. It's not always a matter of transparency. Sometimes when we want to become transparent, we make people vulnerable. It's very important to be transparent, but we need to find the limits. And where has Europe set the threshold? Well, in respect for human rights. The European vision of digital rights is radically different from that of the Chinese or the Americans. And we are creating the tools, in this case the RGPD, which came a while ago, that said that nothing can be done with data that we do not consent of. Then we have the recommendations of the high-level expert group of the European Commission that launched a set of recommendations in 2018 to say what the characteristics of an AI should be for it to be ethical. And then all of the different territories, Catalonia, Spain, Europe, also created its own strategy. And now, currently, we have the AI Act of April, in which Europe, aside from saying that we want these 8 axes of ethics that I will talk about later, takes a stance that we do not want indiscriminate biometrics, and any company that wants to operate in Europe will need to go through the ethical filter of Europe, which is something that had not been resolved and was critical because on your phones you have AIs that are not European. Therefore, they follow different criteria, so to speak. And the other thing is that it forbids any use of data oriented towards manipulating the behavior of the user. I don't know exactly how we will be able to implement this, but at least we have this idea of forbidding it. Catalonia was a pioneer in 2017 with the Barcelona Declaration of the AI. This was one of the first ones to warn that this indiscriminate use of AI could be or could generate vulnerability. And here you have the ethical recommendations. And then in data protection, there was a report created on the algorithms that make automatic decisions and the risks this entails. Actually, the recommendations of the Council of Europe are that the AI cannot make decisions by itself. We need to supervise it. I mean, it's not a robot that will move. You know what I mean. This is the European strategy. And this is a bill of law. This is the draft, and this is what I said. There were these 3 things, and in the end the idea is that we have AI everywhere, and using it well gives us a lot of information about what citizens need and how we can help them, etc. And Europe is now human-centered and respectful of human rights. We have the strictest regulation in the world, the most protective towards people, towards humans, and we have all of these principles coming out of this European vision. that should, in a way, help us frame the use of AI in a situation that is safe for people, that helps create better policies, maybe quicker. But we should always try and pay attention to this vulnerability of data, even if data are aggregated. And this is what I wanted to share with you.
Moltes gràcies, Karina. Superinteressant.
Thank you very much, Karina. Yeah, that's a very recent transformation at the European level. I'd like to give the floor to the next speaker. I'm going to briefly introduce Mercè Crosas. Mercè Crosas is the data chief at the University of Harvard, PhD in astrophysics, also belongs to the Institute of Quantitative and Social Sciences, co-writer of the Principles of Data First about administration of scientific data. She also contributed to recommend the OCDE to have access to public data, and also she's responsible for transparency and open administration at the Catalan government. I hope that you can listen to my words. Thank you very much, Javier. Thank you very much to all of the audience here in the room, but also I'd like to thank Gemma Calvet and also the Transparency Agency, because you are aware about the importance of the topic, and it's always great to have this conversation and to try to go beyond the results of the seminar, right? And I also realized that we had an excellent presentation made by Karina, and it looks like that we agree and that we reached to an and I think that all the points are reinforced, and it can be when we represent data, open data. But first of all, before giving the floor to open data and to talk about it specifically, I'd like to talk about this open government. How do we see this open government before the session, and how the mayors, well, they talk openly about their municipalities. How can we see this open government, and how the mayor of Esplugues has mentioned transparency, the participation point and collaboration, and finally we will deal with open data. This is kind of an objective perspective that will help us to see what are the main topics to deal with. Well, if we have already published data and data are open, we'll have to make less effort. If we create data from scratch for them to be open data, it will be easier when citizens ask for public information. If we do have a perspective that belongs to citizens, and if we take into account the conversations and the needs of citizens, we will have a much more informed citizenship when dealing with a specific issue, and also the possibility to get data and to exchange information. It is the beginning of a great collaboration and cooperation. There is a common information base, and we all understand the same. And this offers the possibility to have a much more mature government. Sometimes it's difficult, and it's kind of impossible to reach this level of understanding, but it can also improve on a constant basis. We will be able to get mature because it's a government able to listen to citizens, a government that is co-creating and co-governing, and it's a honest government, it's a transparent government at the end of the day, and it shows the way the government behaves and the way the government is. This is very helpful to avoid corruption and will help ethics and integrity. Well, data are important and we should put data at the center. When we analyze the majority of open data from this Secretary for Open Government, we should create a country of data. What does this mean? A country of data means a country for research, a country for science, a country that is able to share the interpretation of data. What do we understand about data? Together with models that should count with a high level of expertise, with quite a rigorous methodology, scientific processes to get rid of biases, to know if data will help us to see what's the hypothesis that we are aiming to see what are the conclusions that we can get, and also how from the beginning of the modern science, data and models, they've been always together, hand in hand. So if we start from an hypothesis such as a model to understand the human behavior and the universe, we will have data to double check the experimentation and also to verify data from the basis of the model. And in a Cartesian manner, we are able to implement the model when we repeat the system. So let's talk about this country of data, this country of science. What do we want to do with this country of data? We want to empower citizens. From a public perspective, we want to put the citizens at the center. We can do it through improving, through broadening open data in a responsible manner, and on the other hand, we should help the reuse of data that we already know. Finally, we will see what are the main two trends, but first of all, we need to maximize and to improve open data. Well, we have to do it always protecting privacy and personal data. And we must do it in an ethical manner. But sometimes it's not incompatible. We could have a broader vision of open data. We could design the information in a public and transparent manner, but we can do it not only, as we mentioned before, in a homogenized manner to understand personal data, but also to better understand the context, to better identify data. This is something that we are developing in our research and we should take into account. So not just individualize the data, we should have a much more complex perspective and always taking into account that we can combine thousands of data. And also, it is very important to take into account that we need to have quality data. Quality is important. We are using data through algorithms, through quantitative methodologies such as statistics and machine learning. If data are not representing the population, the target population, we will reach to not correct conclusions. So we should work with the data as much as possible in an adequate manner, but always bearing in mind that they have to represent the population. That is the goal of our service. We want to create this country of data, always collaborating, going beyond the public sector, always cooperating with the private sector, always together with the civil society, different organizations and institutions. Why? Because sometimes we have to face very important challenges, social challenges, health and global challenges, climate change and many other problems. These are very complex issues, and not a single industry or sector will be able to solve these kind of problems. We should be together. when we also talk about technology data that could be reused from the public sector perspective to gather more information about citizens, and if we are able to work with the incentives to collaborate together with all the industries and sectors, if we are able to do it so, finally we'll get a better perspective and a better knowledge coming from different places. This is something that we want to work together with this PPP, always taking into account how to add public value and also bearing in mind how we include civil society. And also we want to reach to a certain level of standards, international standards. So we cannot just be satisfied because we are doing very well in a specific community or municipality, or because things are great in just in our area of influence, right? We need to face global challenges, and we'll be able to face these challenges if we are able to compare data with other countries and regions. If we want to be a reference for other countries and regions, if we want to solve problems here in an adequate manner, we must compare our problems and data with other countries. Therefore, we need the standards of quality. As for reusing data and also the improvement of data, how do we use this data to have an impact on the knowledge that we are able to create? As a starting point, we should identify the talent that we have in our country. It is also important to include the international talent and also to inform citizens and the public administration as well as the professionals, because the idea of working with data, not only reusing data, but also to better understand them, how we must assess them when these data are quality data, and how can we participate all together in order to reuse the data in a rigorous manner, because we count with a previous training, and this training should be on an ongoing basis. Technology changes rapidly. Research and methodology changes also very rapidly. We should understand methodology and the way that we understand, we explore data. Therefore, we need a previous training. We need to know how tools work. And on the other hand, we want to reuse this open data to combine these data from all the sectors in order to improve our policies based on empirical evidences. Not only public policies will rely on the information of these empirical evidence, but also has to include citizen participation, the role of citizenship, and this empirical evidence in order to know how we are taking decisions that will have an impact on our daily life. And we should listen, right? We should, once we have the basics, once we have the empirical data and the different cases, how can we reach a level of standardization to satisfy the demands of citizens? And as I mentioned before, this concept of a country of data is a country of resilience. These data should be open, always together with a rigorous interpretation, an interpretation that could be double-checked and correct. What do we want to do with this country of data? In a few years, we want to create a common space for open data. It should be a point of gathering of different open data portals and different repositories coming from research centers, universities, including also open data such as the ones coming from the private sector and the existing open data portals. So when we will be able to federate and to gather the global standards, being respectful with the international standards, this will offer us the possibility to be together with other European systems, and also we'll be able to compare our data with other data. Sometimes it's difficult to contrast different domains, and that will offer us more knowledge and know-how when you have different perspectives. That's the idea. We want to have this common space for data. So we want to have an open platform in itself. We can talk about this open source code. It will offer the possibility, we as data professionals, we will have the possibility, we have to train citizens, and we have to work with the researchers. We will be able to contribute with the different visualizations, explorations, data stories, and many other elements that are included in the context for a better data interpretation. And to have kind of a decalogue of figures that should be comprehensible, understandable, and also to have this common space that will help us for everyone to participate in data explanation. Well, I also was telling you that we need to follow some global principles and international standards. Therefore, I'd like to talk about what represents the FAIR principles. And this I'm going to swap into English in this presentation. Well, I have some words in English and Catalan. You don't have to read that if you don't want in depth this slide. But first of all, let me talk about the principles one by one to understand what we really want to say with these points. Sometimes it's easy to talk about the principles, but the implementation of principles, sometimes it's not very easy to understand. So when we take into account this seminar, it would be very interesting to see what are the FAIR principles and how can they be combined with AI principles, as Karina mentioned before. Because they are completing each other. On the one hand, we have this concept of findability. I don't know how to say it in Catalan, or how to discover data, how to find data, how to look for data. And what does findability mean? Data sets should be found by machines and by humans. Machines that will be systems that will be useful for the implementation of AI. Needless to say that we need to protect data and we should respect ethical issues. When we publish some data sets, we should know how to find them and how to use them for us to for the system to automatically recognize the value of data. That's why we need, first of all, some metadata standards that will help us to understand the data set, how the software will be able to understand that once you find this data set, you are talking and dealing with this issue, or what are the sources of the information, what are the variables. So you need to have an information that will make a description of the data set. in a standard manner. So you can compare one data set with another data set, and from a descriptive perspective, you will set some metadata standards such as scripted word and many others that are very, such as data site, and you will be able to identify in an unequivocal manner the data, and you can ask data sets for a specific purpose when it's used for a public policy or when you need it for a scientific work, right? So you should be able to quote the data set that you use, which is the basis and the evidence of the result and the conclusions of the public policies that you implemented. So, as we always put the references of the articles and the bibliography, which is something very important for the support of science. So, it's something very important that we should. How I'm going with the time? Okay, I need to speed up. Very briefly, accessibility of data and how to use free and open protocols that will be easily implemented for many systems, and also will be finally very fruitful. Once we've got a data set that you cannot find, metadata already exists. This concept of interoperability, it's a very important principle, where maybe it is the most difficult principle, but once we have data sets, we have a description of data, and we must combine with the data sets, with different variables, with other data sets. That's when you can talk about this and how you can get these data sets, social sciences, and to combine everything. So this part is very, very important. And finally, we need to know what is the vocabulary that we use to describe the data sets for us to better understand when we change the scientific fields. And they can be reusable. They should be reusable, taking into account and also trackability, and if they must be protected or data should be protected. And finally, this reusable feature should be one of the main purposes. Well, in order to conclude, let me tell you that once we get the quality data sets that can be used for AI, when they are combined with the principles of AI to protect human rights, always putting at the center human rights, we will be able to get much more responsible of the data, but we are implementing in a manner that we prepare it and they will be ready, and the methodology will be useful and much more comprehensible, and if they have quite a big level of quality, and if we finally are able to be more efficient. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'll be delighted to have a discussion with you later on. Thank you so much.
Molt bé. Hem vist el segon àmbit, que és un enfocament.
Okay, so we have seen the scientific approach of data, and those of us here are in the technical and scientific area. And, well, we have faith in science, and if science does not respond, we're lost. And in hearing you, well, I thought whether this fair could be an antidote against fake news. Okay, so now we'll move on to the third speaker, who is a bit far from us. Hello, good morning, David. Can you hear me? I don't know if he can hear me. Yes, wonderful. David Quartillas is a researcher of the Internet of Things and People at Malmö University in Sweden. He is a telco engineer and PhD. He is the founder of the 1010 Lab, or IOIO. It used to be called a K3 Prototype Lab of the Malmö University, and currently he's studying the consequences of the introduction of open technologies, the socio-economic acceleration produced by digitalization, and the risks for individuals and social groups. He is a social entrepreneur of the Asoka Foundation, and he is one of the co-founders of the software and hardware Arduino platform that has taken down so many barriers. This Arduino project is a worldwide phenomenon. So without further ado, David, you have the floor. Oh, hello. Thank you very much for having me. I will speak a bit. Well, I think the panel was very well chosen in terms of the order, because I will talk about what happens when we have a society in which many things are open. I like to call it post-open source. And this is a research that I'm barely starting. I'm still scratching the surface. And I've classified a series of topics that I think are important for research and that I will mention and I think help open up the debate. And we need to give some context about platforms, which are a series of tools that we use. And we need to see where they are executed, whether they have a digital format or not, how they are used, what's their governance, and the cyber risks that they can present. Specifically, I will talk about platforms of software, eventually hardware and documentation, and the symbiosis between developers and receptors of the actions of the platforms. So society at large and developers in this case would be a public body or a company that is awarded a tender. There will be this exchange between capacities and technological capacities, and needs and technological capacities. Digital governance is based on needs. If we talk about a private platform, this platform emerges as something that comes up due to a typically economical interest. And the most important thing is that they are transformable and transferable. And this transformability of platforms is risky because they can change overnight. And transformation can be from the point of view of the user interface or legal terms. And these transformations can bring people using the platforms closer, in as much as these platforms may have become infrastructure as part of the daily life of people. Open source or open code that has been mentioned in the previous presentation is a base of code which is available in the uncompiled format so people can read it and therefore modify it as well and use it. It inherits certain characteristics from free software, which aside from being open, it establishes that anything that is generated with it should be open as well. Free software goes one step beyond open software. And once open code came up, it generated a new community of praxis that is now permeating public narrative. Even the European Commission in the latest version of Horizon proposes that all the results are open in as much as possible and available for humankind at large. Europeans in principle, but humankind actually. And there are many things on the internet run on open software, and this is very important because this communication that we're having at the moment is possible thanks to the existence of this software. The governance model is varied, but open software introduces a governance model that seems counterproductive, which is what we call benevolent dictatorship. At the end of the chain, there is a person who makes the ultimate decision. It's benevolent because it is willing to listen to the reasons why, but it's still the owner of this code base. There's always also freedom of fork, which means copying the entire code and using for a different purpose. There have been cases recently, for example, with a software that is used for audio editing. Developers of the platform sold it to a company, and the community does not agree with this, and they continue to develop it on their own. And the most important thing regarding the influence in real life of open code is that this is the motor, the engine of digital economy. Anything happening in digital economy works via many blocks of open code. This means that open code has a very strong and real impact on the everyday lives of people. And I'm showing this slide to explain two concepts that with my colleague César García we've worked on defining, and they are on the one hand referring to how idealistic technologies or concepts historically always seem to be taken up by the neoliberal economy, and the devaluation of this concept, when having it devoid of values, increases its outreach. We conducted a study on meeting spaces for people who work with technology, and we saw that when taking away the values, for example, the hacker spaces or hacker labs were very leftist at the beginning, and when removing the political aspects, these spaces become something else, and they flourish more and reach more people. So what happens with free software and open code? Free software was something very political at first, almost extremist. Open code is a more commercial version of this, devoid of certain values, reaching a larger coverage in society. And this is the source of what we now define as post-open source, where we are now. Open code is exploited by economical powers such as any other good, such as water, air, or the electromagnetic spectrum, and the exploitation comes first from humans, and later on, because of the optimization of resources, from automation. And this is where we can talk about AI to automate processes, etc. And almost as a fun note, I think that the starting point of all of this process is the entrepreneurial hacker, the hacker who finds out that their knowledge can provide them with value and profit. So the rest of my talk is based on 7 cases that basically open up questions as to what I believe may be the fields of study of post-open source, and they are very much related to the things mentioned during the talk and can impact aspects such as transparency and governance. On the one hand, digital work via open code is no longer an option, it is a requirement. The Commission encourages the use of open code. Universities have acknowledged it as a mechanism of publication. It is as valuable as publishing in journals. So in the end, it becomes work. It's work as such. It's a job. It is not my free time. I am paid for it and I have goals. Monitoring tools are also done based on open code. Video capture systems, etc. Follow-up of working time, they are all based on open source or open code. So the same employee generates their own control mechanisms and tools. In a way, we can say that open source generates itself then. Needs pop up, we create them, and we are generating the code via people as proxies. A very important thing is that authorship is diluted amongst many authors or developers. At the beginning, a few developers were the authors. They were responsible. If something did not work out, you pointed your finger towards them. But right now, with the development of agile work control systems, what happens is that we are dividing authorship amongst many people. So a single open source project is gigantic based on how many people contributed. And this means that it is very difficult to know at the end of the day who did what, be it a comment or an improvement, etc. So the big question for me from the point of view of digital work is what resistance tools do we have at the moment? In industrial work, we have trade unions, and we are seeing how digital work is starting to generate digital trade unions, but are the tools the right ones? Digital companies are transnational, and they generate a situation which is completely different, economically speaking, than that generated by a company, a physical company. So the big question here is, do we have the adequate tools to defend ourselves in those situations? On the other hand, we have the concept of automatic authorship. Recently, there's been a scandal in the world of software production. Well, I'm calling it a scandal to call it something, because IDEAI, which was acquired by Microsoft, launched a code generation system based on an AI algorithm that had learned with the open source that was available in GitHub. So many questions arise from this, and we should wonder, did they ask the creators of the software whether it could be used to train AI? Who is the author of a software generated by AI? Is it a compendium of the thousands of authors that feed this AI? On the other hand, what is the role of humans once the code starts to be generated automatically? Will we become reviewers? And as we heard in the previous talk, we cannot let the code make the final decision. We need a person at the end of the process, but still, what will our role be? We went from being creators to be reviewers, but in order to be a reviewer, you need to have a strong creation knowledge. So what will actually be our role? That is a question we need to ask ourselves. And then there's another important aspect, which is the software lobby. Open source, mainly represented by Linux, the OS, is greatly funded by large corporations. If we analyze the annual reporting of the Linus Foundation, we see that the great contributors, financial contributors who funded the Linus Foundation are large corporations, Microsoft, Intel, even Apple. So the big question here is, can we really believe that the fact that these companies are paying developers to generate software does not have an impact on the creation of the software? It is complex. It is difficult to escape this problem. I believe that we should accept the fact that even if it's indirectly, the generation of open software is very much impacted by the interests of these companies. They are doing it indirectly, but they are still indirectly producing it. So what should be the stance of small software developers? And in Europe, this is what we should be asking ourselves. A great deal of the European economy is based on SMEs. European developers are always looking at SMEs and how they can be a part of this narrative and how they can play the game. But if what they produce will not have an impact on this because they are competing with large corporations, what is their role? What role can they play? Another case is related to means of distribution of open source. There are several ones. One of them is that of developers, which is open source databases funded by different companies, GitHub, bought by Microsoft, GitLab, an independent company. You can install your own server, etc. But on the other hand, we have the distribution towards people. People on the street who have mobile phones and they execute an app on their smartphone, and these apps are launched via digital markets that are owned by a small number of companies. So even if the production of software is open or may be open, the means of production may be free of cost, but the final products end up in markets that are not precisely free. So we see that app markets in the end are another form of control deriving from open source. So where I want to go with all of this idea is that open source, it is, yes, indeed beneficial, but it presents certain inherent risks that we are not seeing at the moment and that we should be able to anticipate. So we need to ask ourselves what will be the role of large corporations, app markets, as gatekeepers of these transnational markets. Do they operate based on ethical principles? It is very difficult to forecast and decide based on that. And then what cultures? Different cultures have different principles, and we said earlier that AI is different for China, for Europe, for the US. AI is a clear expression of a cultural difference. On the other hand, we talk about the fact that open source systems are very complex as of today. For a small producer, it's very difficult to compete in the creation of a cloud system. These cloud systems work within gigantic data centers that are delocalized, and they are owned by large corporations. And interestingly enough, we have the concept of a public cloud, which is executed by a private company, but they appropriate the public concept. This is, well, the ultimate thing from the philosophical point of view, seeing as the word public, funded by public bodies, is all of a sudden produced from the start by private companies. So we need to be careful with this, and we need to manage this, because there will also be a change in the use of words that will go beyond all of this. And on the other hand, it's important to realize that open source is optimized for sharing, not necessarily for efficiency. We can debate about this from many perspectives, but right now, code has been designed to be executed in server farms that have a high cost and that consume a lot of resources. The paradigms of connected society have not borne in mind sustainability until recently, so we need to start thinking about how can we transform these large data management centers and information centers. And we need to wonder whether there aren't any more efficient ways of producing code. For example, we've talked a lot about using iFarm as a tool, but this tool consumes a lot more resources than a programming team. So we need to be able to optimize all of these and create a smart equation of how we will execute our new algorithms. And just to finish, my last case, I think this is the most important one, is that higher education is at risk. What has happened is that universities generated a lot of open code. They started generating their own code. This has generated a new market, and companies are forcing universities now to educate on the code they generate, because this is what they need so that when people graduate, they can work. So this generates tension. Universities have a need to produce graduates who will find a job, and they have to use the open source generated by these companies that may not be general enough for all society. So this is something we need to ask ourselves, because we are risking the independence of universities when generating education. And on the other hand, it's important to realize that this new world, this open source generates new jobs, new professions that come up a lot more quickly and in the global north, which generates a lot of inequality. So we need to wonder, when we do this, whether we are acting responsibly. And with this, I will finish my presentation and I will open the floor for questions. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, David.
Thank you very much. Well, we dealt with the two main and first topics. We were kind of optimistic towards utopia. I don't know, how do you feel right now? David, I think that you have something hidden and you will offer us some proposals and a different approach. Are there principles to fight against these kind of problems? Yes. I just talked about the risks. Let me tell you that open technology is offering us the possibility to have this discussion, allowed the AI to progress. What I do simply want to share with you and underline, it is that we must take into account the risks. Because when we talk amongst us and when we talk together with the corporations that will offer us these kind of services, we should tell them, this is the limit line. So we should take into account what are the limits. And this is what I want to do. I don't want to make this research to become a cancellation culture. And mainly, when we take and we consider one of the most successful cases of open source, so we can see what's the way forward. And we can see some optimism. We have right now Wouter Tepper. I don't know if he's going to offer us a positive message or not. Well, we are talking about the European Act that is going to be passed this year. The principles were created in 2015, 2016, right? Yes, that's it. And we also had David Quartier's perspective. He talked about the nowadays situation. And Wouter Tebbens, he is the co-founders and chair of the Free Knowledge Institute. He is an engineer in the Netherlands. He is also the responsible of Think Networks in Catalonia. It is a community dealing with the Internet of Things. He is working in an open internet system to improve online calls and conferences. Yes, so this is your open proposal. You are an activist of this open world at the FKI, the Free Knowledge Institute. He works in this perspective for more fair technologies. And he's going to talk about the surveillance capitalism. He's going to talk about this phenomena, what is the surveillance capitalism that appeared in the Google activities, and it's putting at risk so many principles that were accepted in our society, such as human rights. So, Wouter, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Xavier. Thank you very much, Gemma. And thanks so much to all the organizers. What a honor. It is a big honor to me to be together with you in this panel. What a luxury to me. And the open knowledge, the free knowledge, and the different manners that were presented by the previous panelists are very important. I do agree. We are all fighting for a better world, and on the other hand, we can see that there are some conditions that must be satisfied in this surveillance capitalism. So, in this very short presentation, I try to be very short and brief. We're going to talk about this concept of capitalism, and later on I'll offer some ideas about what could be the appropriation strategies to overcome the issues created by this concept. Well, we all know once we are not a customer of a service, sometimes we are called a product, It's not a very precise definition, but we are kind of an exploited individual in the system. And sometimes we don't pay with money these corporations, or we pay very few money to these big corporations, but they are the biggest in the planet. And they were able to take the reins and to control almost everything, mainly in the US. They are US corporations. And you know that they have an incredible turnover. And if you put in the middle the column, last year column, they overcome the Spanish GDP last year. Therefore, we should be aware of it. And how is that possible? What are they doing? At the beginning, it was quite reasonable. It was a free service, research engine 20 years ago. Well, we were users. They could study our behavior. They were able to make some analytics. They could create algorithms at the page rank. They warranted that it was a very scientific system, a very rigorous and objective system. And later on, well, you found in your server the most relevant web pages, and from this strategy on, they were able to improve. They added the AdWords, the advertisements, that they are kind of uncomfortable, but well, we accepted that. And they are able to tailor-make the advertisements. That was fantastic. So we thought that it was something acceptable. But lately, we wonder if this is true or not. Is there a hidden part that we are not able to see? When we talk about the behavior that we have all in the internet, well, we can surf the web and we click on a banner and we can buy something. They are able to study and to analyze our behavior. They are able to create a behavioral model of each and every one of us. What are the standards? What are the when we want to buy? Are we compulsive consumer? These are specific information that they know more than we do. And they are able to reach a bigger level. They were able to create predictive products. Because the sellers, they want some guarantees when they advertise something. They want to sell their products and they want to sell their campaigns, political campaigns, so they want to have such a big level of certainty. Therefore, there are kind of results that are sold relying on the behavioral strategies. And Susana Subo in 2014 said that this system was called the surveillance capitalism in the digital context. Therefore, we created this behavioral added value. It is not technology in itself, but it is a capitalism and market logics in the digital context. It is not the same as the digital context, but we are used that those that rule the digital world cannot be implemented in all the algorithms and AI systems that we showed before. Those concepts without these surveillance logics are not possible. And behavioral data are outside of the visible range. If we talk about data protection regulation, this is the lower part of the graph. This is the circuit. So we have this behavior data that do not belong to ourselves. Now, this data belong to Google, Gmail, and many other corporations. So they created this kind of behavior, and we are not aware about the fact that they are the owners. They are the owners, therefore they are able to create the products, and the legislation escapes from the model that they were able to create. So what are the main consequences? Let's talk about some of the consequences. We have some bias when we research some information. They have blacklist of any kind. They have the promotional products. So what does really happen when you are blocked? Some people are blocked. You cannot interact anymore with the environment that they are offering. So you can lose your identity in the media. There is also electoral manipulation. We know the scandal of Cambridge Analytica that was published in 2018. This corporation, thanks to the support of Google, they were able to create electoral profiles of millions of people. They did it in the US, and later on they did it in other countries. Through the data, they were able to know what were your preferences and what they did have to do to change the voting intention for them to take an advantage, depending on who they were working with. They worked for the first successful Trump campaign and with the Brexit campaign and many other campaigns. After the scandal, they put an end to the corporation, and the founders, they created other corporations. And it is true that Facebook still exists, and Facebook is still the #1 ally if you want to win an election in today's world, as well as Google. So Google, Eric Schmidt, the Google CEO, was on the side of Democrats. So he helped Barack Obama. We don't know what he did, but, well, this is the way things are. Well, I didn't mention before the fake news issue, but it's also that has an important role to play in electoral processes, and it belongs to the daily life of population. We know that those platforms, they earn more money if we are more time reading the information, and how they create metadata to create this kind of extremes. Once we have a controversy, people are more engaged, people do participate more, and there is kind of a level of aggressivity and violence in the world. This is what Frances Haugen says. It was, well, she's a former worker in Facebook, and she offered thousands of papers and documents and presented the Facebook papers at the Congress of the US. It's also a very big scandal. So Mark Zuckerberg said that he changed the world of the enterprises and the corporations. The link with privacy, geolocalization, you know that we all have a device that spies us. Who doesn't have a smartphone in this room? Okay, someone here in the room doesn't have a smartphone. Well, you can have an Android smartphone without the surveillance system of Google. I can tell you how to do it if you wish. Well, the censorship that goes through all the platforms, this a year ago, it was organized at the University of California. It was held a seminar. They invited a Palestine activist, and a Jewish lobby wanted to censor, and they talked to Zoom, and they said, well, this is not acceptable. So Zoom censored this seminar, and after that, loads of activists and the academia world was scandalized, and they said this is not possible. We have chair freedom, freedom of speech. We should be more autonomous about what we talk about in our university, and we're dealing about many things through the internet, right, and online connections. They wanted to have the different levels of security, and also Zoom, well, wanted to censor everything. These are very well-known cases, and this happens on a constant basis. And we know that these platforms are not designed for benefiting ourselves, but also they are created to get addicted. The more time you work through these tools, the more time you are in the platform, the more they can create behavioral models, and the more they will sell different proposals from the advertisers. Well, in the 90s, we began with the mainstream in the internet, and many people thought that we were coming from a period of the industrial times, much more the center with the factory and the network. Everything was much more centralized. Therefore, we thought, well, we need to be much more decentralized. We should create a much more distributed network, and through a distributed network, you are more free. You can go from one node to the other without having to get through the center. We thought that this was the real situation, but it was not this way. These big tech corporations, they are controlling almost everything. They do concentrate a lot of power in their hands, more than ever. So we have a non-aligned interest with the platforms. They want to maximize their profits. We said before how they did it. Shubov is talking about a coup d'etat. I do recommend you to read the text. Well, she talks about this patch and this coup, and how can we get once again the control of data, of systems and algorithms, and how can we guarantee transparency and good governance. I'm gonna offer you some ideas, always in line with the previous presentations. The reappropriation strategies. Well, this is the open source software. It is the best way to fight for our rights, to design, to create, to contribute towards this open source software. Here in Catalonia, loads of social movements. In the last elections, we voted and approved 44 measures for the digital parliament. All the political parties accepted, all the political parties at the City Council of Barcelona, they are all fighting for technological security. We also have the Subtech, we have the Pangea Society that offers some services on the cloud. We also have a Commons Cloud. We have many structures, and we also have different open source systems. This is something that we can all make possible together with all the city council together here in Barcelona. We can have access to Centillo. It's an open source software that was created in the municipality of Barcelona with sensor data, open format. We also have different mobile apps. Well, I could reach to this venue without navigating through Google. It's possible. But we do also need to bear in mind and to have a clear idea that all open source softwares and many other systems, they can be improved. And if we want things to work better, we must invest time, money, and effort. The most important thing to me are the foundations. These foundations to me are the 4 freedoms. You can use it for any purpose, you can use it to get adapted to your needs, you can make copies, you can distribute the improvements that were made. These four main freedoms, or the four foundations, they can guarantee the autonomy of human beings and to respect the human rights. Under this framework, we can create wherever we want. Open source, it's not good or bad. This is the main framework. That's where we are. And relying on each and every actor and stakeholder and relying on the kind of projects and communities, we'll be able to reach one thing or the other. Lately, we are used, maybe I'll dare to say that in the last 20 years, we are used to get very perfect services. There are billions of investments that were possible through the systems, and it's possible through this surveillance model of capitalism that sometimes, between brackets, it's for free, but it always has a cost. If we want to fight for human rights in this digital era, this is the starting point. And I'd like to add on something. The public administration and governments, they have loads of possibilities. They should work for that. They can hire, they can deploy services under their control. If we talk about open source, it's a way for them to control everything. And this is possible in countries such as Germany. Universities, they never work with Gmail. They have Nextcloud. They are the ones that command the information, and they are also able to control GDPR and data protection. Another proposal for self-control, it is the collective self-control. We can have like a cooperative cloud. I'm one of the co-founders of this service, right? We began 3-4 years ago. We had an office where you could have your calendars, contacts, and files, and you can get in touch with external individuals, managers of platforms, discussion platforms, email services, as well as different forums, financial management, always gathered in a single account. It's a corporate model. You should be a member of the cooperative, and you will have 100% warranty that all your rights will be respected, because it's a non-profit system, and the data won't be never sold in the future for a capital fund. So everything is guaranteed. So you can go there, clouds.com. What else? Meetcup. It is this cooperative service of conference calls, and we created during lockdown. For more than a year, we are more than 100 members and partners. You can go there, meet.com. Yeah, we should stop. Okay. Well, I'd like to talk about the platform cooperatives, the online meeting cooperative. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't have time. And also the technological architecture. We are used to a client server. We witnessed the birth of the blockchain, and there is something different. Okay, such as M2P. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Boter. Great. Okay. So we should put an end to the panel. Very interesting, the topic of connections. Loads of open questions. We'll have a 15-minute break. We'll come back. Thank you. Thank you so much.